of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Pitman, please call roll.
Mrs. Bolton?
Here.
Ms. Farrell?
Here.
Mr. Grossman?
Here.
Ms. Higby Iona? Ms. Johnson? Mrs. Spoke?
Yeah, here.
Ms. Pappalardo?
Here.
And Mrs. Dora?
Here. All right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Crispin for the
All
budget
right.
presentation.
Good. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is our public hearing on the budget, and hopefully everyone had a chance to get a packet. I have a couple other extras up here if anybody needs additional copies of here. So our purpose of tonight is to formally present the budget. There's been a lot of informal conversations that we've had here at the board meetings, that the Board of Education's had. Tonight is the formal adoption of the budget. It finalizes everything. And there are some things that the board's going to be discussing tonight relative to possible considerations to possibly add some things into the budget. We're going to get to that a little bit more toward the end. And obviously, the purpose of tonight is to try to explain for everyone, the board and the community, some of the challenges we're facing, where we stand relative to certain elements as far as our instructional programs and our support programs are concerned. So we're going to run through as much as I can. I've tried to synthesize this down and try to hit the key points. So hopefully we'll touch upon any questions that you may have, and certainly there'll be opportunities for us to answer any questions you may have as we kind of get toward the end. So with that, let me just kind of get things started here. I think we all recognize the challenges that we're facing here in Pitman. It's something we've talked about certainly each and every year that we've had the public hearings and most of the public meetings that we've had. You know, state aid and the reductions in state aid has had a significant impact on our ability to maintain the programs that we value here in this community. Programs obviously driven by staffing. So this is just the last 3 years. Doesn't truly even reflect what's happened over the 6-year period of S2. It was a funding adjustment that has been put into place by the legislature to kind of take money away from districts that they perceived got too much money because their enrollment was decreasing, and kind of shifted that to districts who had increasing enrollment. This budget that's being adopted, presented tonight, is the last year of S2. So from here on in, everybody will kind of be on that same playing ground, so to speak. S2 will be done. There will be no more adjustments. Still a lot of unknowns relative to the impact as far as state aid in the future, but it will not be impacted by the S2 legislation. So you can just see here, just in the last 3 years, the significant decrease, the impact that we've had as far as our funding sources are concerned, from the $8.1 million in 22-23 to the 4.9 where we stand today. And we're going to see that throughout the conversation that we have here tonight relative to the impact that that's had on our ability to maintain some of our programs. So the budget is divided up into two pieces. It's a relatively easy process in terms of development of the budget. The budget usually starts, the budget developmental process starts with us looking at what our needs are. It's really looking at more on the expenditure side. So sometime in October, and November, and December, we develop a calendar. We have our administrators who start reaching out to teachers and staff members and whoever they feel can provide information that they may need to start determining what our needs are going to be. So we kind of start to build that side of the budget. That's the appropriation side, more commonly known as the expenditure side of our budget. This is what we need the money. This is how we're going to spend the money in order to support the programs, add programs, modify programs. And usually by, I would say, mid-January, toward the end of January, we have a pretty clear picture of what that looks like. All right? And we're in the process of fine-tuning. But it's not until we receive our state aid at the end of February that we know, are we okay? Are we in balance? Means that our expenditures and our appropriations over here are equal to the amount that we're going to be getting over here in terms of state aid and tax levy and any other revenue resources. If it's all good, we're good. But unfortunately, the place we've been for the last couple of years is our expenditures and appropriations have far exceeded the amount of revenue that we had to support it because of those reductions in state aid. Tax levy amount still goes up a little bit, 1 or 2% every year. but state aid is a major part of our revenue sources. Therefore, that not going up, that decreasing has made it very, very difficult to maintain this expenditure side. We have to present a balanced budget to the county office for their review and approval. That had to be done back after we got the state aid in early March. So in order to do that, the only way we can get balanced, because this is set, there's really nothing you can do with revenues. The only way to do that is to reduce your expenditures. And that's the challenge we've been facing in the last couple of years. So this reflects a balanced budget, but it also reflects some significant reductions in order for us to get the budget balanced. As we discussed, and I shared when we adopted the tentative budget, whether we liked it or not, last year we had an alternative. This year we did not. And that's what's made this budget more challenging and probably more painful. Even everything we may have had to go through in order to get where we are today, but moving forward, more challenging, more difficult, more painful because of the reductions that had to take place in order to get the budget balanced. So I'm going to start by looking at the revenue side, because the revenue side basically drives it. We can talk about the expenditures and have conversations about the things that are there and the things that are not there and what options may become available to us, but it all starts with the revenues. So I'm just going to briefly run through these. I'll highlight a few things. So what we've done here, and I think everybody has these copies, is we've circled the areas in which I'm going to kind of make mention of and try to give you some insights in terms of those challenges. So first of all is the local tax levy. As you can see, it is the largest part of our revenue side of the budget. You can see where we've been over the last couple of years. I think we've talked about it before, but if you have not heard this before, there is a cap on the tax levy. It's a 2% cap. The tax levy cannot go up for school districts more than 2% from one year to the next. There are some adjustments that can be taken, but there are very, very few. One is enrollment, so we can rule that one out. The other one's for health benefits. I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but that's not something we were able to take for this year, so it really is a straight 2% cap. Just to give you some insights, if you do the mathematics, you will see that going from 22 to 23, we did go up by 3%. It's around 3%. It may not be exactly, because there was an adjustment that we were able to take last year based on our initial calculations in terms of the increase in health benefits. It's one of the two that we potentially could take. And we took that adjustment last year because we needed the relief because of the pressures of the reduced state aid. But they come back and then they look at your actual cost of health benefits. Ours were projected to be here, maybe they'd only go up to here. And they basically came back and said we weren't entitled to that 3% increase, so they've adjusted our cap for this year down to 1%. So that over the course of the 2 years, it still comes out to 4%, but instead of being 2 and 2, it's kind of 3 and 1. So just add another challenge to kind of the issues we're dealing with this year, is that the amount we were able to reduce the tax levy, and that's obviously good for the taxpayers, but for us as a district and trying to support our expenditures was less than it maybe could have been. So again, if you did the math, you'd find that, but there you see over the course of the 3 years what that tax levy amount is. Then, of course, the next one is most important, is that the total revenues from state sources. They're the same three numbers, I think, that are on the previous page, if I'm not mistaken. So we've already talked about that. You can see that it's over $3 million in just that 3-year period. Averages out to over $1 million a year. Last year was about 1.5. This year it's got 750, between $700,000 and $800,000 reduction. So that's been significant. Budgeted fund balance is the next thing that I have circled there. This is something that I always share anytime I've got the opportunity to do a public hearing. It's certainly something that we got to keep an eye on, and to some extent might be a little concerning. Budgeted fund balance is kind of like taking money out of your savings account to pay for your monthly expenses or your yearly expenses for a school district. It's okay to do as long as you're replenishing your savings account. But if you're not replenishing your savings account and you go in there another year to go and take money from your savings account to offset your expenses, now you can't pay for your expenses. And we have some pretty hefty numbers for a district of our size. When you look at 1.5 million in 23-24, 1.2 million in 24-25, for pretty significant amounts of money. And so a little bit of a question, are we going to be able to regenerate that amount of surplus moving forward? And this could this could be an issue next year. So let's hypothetically say next year there's only maybe $750,000 that can be put in there. Well, now there's a $500,000 deficit on the revenue side. It's got to be made up for somehow. Well, maybe you get lucky and it gets made up in state aid. Not sure we can count on that. The tax levy is only 2%. That's not going to make it up. So what do you have to do? You got to reduce expenditures. And you always have to be very careful. So use of fund balance is something, again, you need to be careful with. It's unfortunate that we're in the situation that we're in, but just to be able to kind of stay where we are, this is what we are recommending at this particular time. I'm going to probably come back to that. We are going to talk a little about fund balance a little bit later on, and we'll talk a little bit more there, but just something I do think is important to highlight. Withdrawal from capital reserve account, just kind of highlight that because that is something else we're going to talk about in a few minutes after we do kind of get through the formal budget. But you can see in 23-24, board appropriated 1.187, $1,187,000. That represents the projects that we just opened bids on, which is for the HVAC system here at the high school, be the gymnasium, and it will be the weight room. The heating system there is almost close to failure, so it had to be replaced. So that represents the cost for replacing the heating there, so we don't get a point where it just goes in the middle of the winter and we're feeling really stuck. But in addition to that, it does add air conditioning. So the board tonight will be accepting the bid to have that work done. It's being financed 100% by the state. It's called a ROD grant. We applied to the state for this amount of money, 1.187. We have to pay the money up front, and then we get reimbursed. All right, so that's why it's in our budget. All right, so we have to pay for the money up front. It means we pay for that up front and get reimbursed. The ROD grant pays for 60% of the project. Right there, 60%, 40, thank you. Chris, sorry, push on. 40% of the project, we pay for 60. So 60% will be paid out of that 1.1 there, and 40% will be reimbursed to us after the project is completed, but we have to put in the 100% to pay for it up front in order to get our 40% back. So that represents that project, and we took the money out of capital reserve. Let me just talk about capital reserve for a second. So the board has only really, I would say, two primary mechanisms. I'll say three. There's three ways in which the board can put money away, like in a savings account. There's just a regular, I'll call it unbudgeted fund balance, money that's left over at the end of the year. There's always money left over. You can't spend a budget of $25 million down to zero. It just doesn't happen. You're going to have little bits and pieces left over. That's called fund balance. It's just leftover monies that you're able to accumulate. Board of Educations are not allowed to have more than 4% of their total budget, for the most part, in fund balance. Right? If you have anything more than 4%, it has to be put back in the next budget as tax relief to the taxpayer. Gets the benefit. Anything over. So that's just how it works. All right? And you need 4%. 4% is not a lot of money. 4% of 21 million is probably about 25 million, about $1 million roughly. Because you got to pay bills, and sometimes our revenues may be delayed coming in, whether it's state aid, whether it's anything else. So it just helps you with the cash flow to be able to have that 4% over here. And the idea is you don't want to touch that 4%. So that's one way in which districts can save funds. The other two are called capital reserve accounts and maintenance reserve accounts. So if the board has a little bit more than 4% left over, all right, they could, and they have, and it's shown here that they're giving a lot back in that budget fund balance. It's a lot part of that 1.2 million. You give part of that back for tax relief, but you got to be careful that you don't give too much because you may not have that to give back the next year. So there's two other kind of buckets that you can put your money into. Maintenance reserve. Maintenance reserve would be to put money aside for something that may need maintenance. Maybe you have a heating system that breaks down unexpectedly and you need to replace it. Well, now you have a maintenance reserve account, a little bit put away to address those issues. So that's a maintenance reserve, and the board has a couple $100,000 put away in their maintenance reserve accounts. We use that to kind of offset the budget a little bit, to help with the maintenance. If there's, I think the budget may reflect a couple classrooms that have carpeting being replaced, that's kind of maintenance. Other things that might need to be dealt with, it's not a lot. You can see, I think it's only $30,000. You see it there. It's only $30,000. It's not a lot of money that they're taking from their maintenance reserve account in order to address any projects. The third bucket is the capital reserve account. Capital is similar to what we're doing in the gymnasium. It's a capital reserve. It's something that's has a longer lifespan than maybe carpet does, or painting on the walls, or something of that nature. So they have been able to put money into a capital reserve account. And now they're taking part of that money. They did it last year to fund that project, because we had to fund the project 100% in order to get our 40% back. All right? So that's the third bucket. So basic savings, basic reserves, only can go up to 4%. Then you have a maintenance reserve account and a capital reserve account. You can see those reflected there. And then the last line there is the total operating budget. I want to really emphasize that. This is the total operating budget. This is basically what it takes to run the district. And I know we're talking about this on the revenue side, but you're going to see that same number over on the appropriation expenditure side. They don't call it operating budget. They call it something different, but I just want to give you an idea. And you can see it's kind of not going in the direction that it normally goes. It bumped up a little bit last year, but you can see it's dropped off from the 25 down to the 22. Remember last year we did get a little bump up with the additional state aid that we received after we did the budget, so that kind of bumped up that number there a little bit. And the other thing is, it's not a really good apples to apples comparison, because the first column, the 22-23 actual, is really kind of what we actually spent. That's an audited column. That's based on the audit and the end of the year report. So that's what we really actually spent. And I said before, we don't spend the entire budget. So it's always going to be less than what was budgeted. Whereas the middle column is a budgeted number, a revised budgeted number, and of course the last column, the 24-25, is the proposed budget for next year. So, quick overview on the revenue side. It's very important for, I think, all of us, especially some of the board, that we understand all those elements, because that's what really drives our ability to do the things that we want to do. All right? So, we're going to flip over. I'm not going to really, you can continue. I'm only going to go up to there. I'm only going to talk about the operating budget. Then we get into money that comes in from the federal resources, other state monies that we use that have to be used for very specific purposes. You can see a lot of federal monies that we received during the COVID period. It's this ESSER monies. And then you can even get into the debt service, which is the bottom. And the bottom of page 3, you can see the total overall budgets listed in that last column: $27 million, $28 million, $26 million for revenues. All right. And the last page there, if you flip back, it's a comparison of the total operating budgets. I had circled these, and we looked at these numbers already, between 23 and 24. And you can see there's a significant decrease of $2.2 million comparing kind of where we were last year to where we are right now. There's a few things in there that's in that budget. As I said, it does reflect, I think, the additional 900-some thousand we received last year after the budget was completed, if you recall. The state came out and gave us all the extra monies, so that kind of skews that a little bit. You can kind of almost take that away from the 2.2. You get about 1.3 million, which is really what the shortfall last year was: 1.3, 1.5 million. So let's talk about expenditures. I'm just going to do that very quickly. Start with some of the positives. This is more or less just kind of what we shared last year. Supports most of the current instructional programs. There isn't an impact in terms of not having a program, or they're generally supported, probably certainly not to the same level that they're currently supported, but there's an effort here to try to maintain as much as we possibly can. Student program, co-curricular, extracurricular. There's not being a lot of money being spent here. There's not a lot of savings. We will certainly be looking as we have those periods of times in which students are indicating their desires to play and participate in different clubs and programs and sports. And we'll always be evaluating them and whether it's cost effective to provide those programs. We try to maintain a balance. You know, a lot of people bring up freshman sports. Well, where we have places where there's a lot of students, I think this board has been very supportive of trying to give all those students an opportunity to participate, but yet there's not really a lot of savings there. You know, health benefits is certainly a major cost to the district. The funded mandates are certainly an issue. We have increases in fixed costs throughout the budget, insurance, utilities, contracts, transportation, and you know, we're certainly supporting the continuous support of our school resource officers and school security abilities. So that's the plus side. On the challenging side, unfortunately, as we look at the next list there, the only way we can balance a budget when you're a district in which 85% of the budget, if not more, is made up of personnel, is it's going to impact personnel. And it's going to impact our ability to maintain personnel. So this budget here does reflect the elimination of positions, include teaching and clerical and custodial. Custodial twice. And you know, potentially support staff just depending on what the needs are relative to the student needs, and there could potentially be adjustments there. Additional to that, in terms of programs, we're looking at the possibility of fewer sections in grades K through 4. As this budget stands right now, we only have one teacher in grades K through 4th grade. We have 4 in 5th grade because it is a large group there, and we have 4 in 6th grade because of the nature of that program. I'm not sure, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but you know, we certainly are holding out hope that there's going to be some relief in the form of additional funding. There has passed the Assembly. It's passed the Assembly, and the Senate will be hopefully taking action within the next couple weeks. It's a little concerning because this time last year at the public hearing, I think we knew we were getting the funding at that time, so it was a little bit easier to have this conversation knowing that we were going to be able to bring back certain positions. You know, we are not there right now. Based on the Assembly bill, and there is a mirror bill in the Senate. It's 2/3, right?
Approximately.
Yeah, it's approximately, let's say, 2/3 of what we lost. So we're looking at around maybe $500,000, give or take a few here and there. So that's nice, but it's not a lot. And you know, certainly if we're fortunate enough to be able to receive those funds, then certainly we'll have to have a conversation in terms of how those funds will be allocated. I should mention, so we're talking, just to make sure we're all clear, so there's 5 positions right there. There's 1 grade, we only have 3 in 1st right now. So the plan would be right now, there will be obviously 3 in 2nd. But certainly the desire would be, if we're fortunate enough to get the additional funding, to get back to the 4 that we would have then lost. So then we get back to 4 kindergartens, 4 1st, 4 3rds, and 4 4ths. Because we don't need that 4th in 2nd grade. So again, this is kind of where we are now, but we're hoping that we are going to be able to make these adjustments if the funding does come through. And then programs, I think fewer sections K through 1, reductions in basic skills services. Unfortunately, we have to shift some of our basic skills teachers into classroom positions, you know, in order to kind of manage, you know, where we are budgetarily. And also there will be some reductions in special ed services relative to our co-teach, you know, and some of the different services we provide within those programs. So they're the unfortunate pieces, you know, of a budget. The unfortunate pieces of the impact that we've had, you know, relative to our loss of state aid. I hope that, you know, certainly there's some understanding that these are decisions that are not made lightly. These are very, very difficult decisions. And when you get down to those last elements of what it's going to take, this is where we are now. I'll say that putting the additional funding off to the side, this is always a process. And I say it's a process because things change. And, you know, there are retirements that may happen that we were not aware of. So those things change. There are things that happen within the programs themselves, services maybe that change and enable us to realize funding that we were not anticipating. We have students maybe that are looking to come back into the district, which would provide some levels of financial relief. So it's always opportunities for us to reevaluate as these things occur, how we can utilize those funds to kind of get back to a little closer in terms of where we were. So we will continue to do that. Let's see. So that takes us to the advertised appropriations. I'll just do a quick run through. I think you're going to see there, I've circled many of the areas in which there are reductions on the appropriation side. It's not something you normally see. We know it's not teacher salaries, salaries in districts and salaries in everywhere else are moving upwards. So it's not because of that, it's because of loss of staff. And you see that in the first line in terms of regular programs instruction. You see it in the second line as far as special education is concerned. You see it in the third line as far as basic skills is concerned. And I'll just mention that in that line item, we still are maintaining one position in basic skills, but that position is fully funded from our Title I. So that's why it doesn't show there. It's going to show somewhere else. But you can see, unfortunately, that's a significant impact there as far as both services and personnel are concerned. Bilingual, I mentioned that just as it's an increase. It's one of those things that we're working with right now in terms of providing services to that particular population. Our population is growing. As a matter of fact, we went over a certain number that when you reach, you need a more, I'll call it more formalized program than kind of where we were. So we'll be looking to make sure we address that properly. Tuition out of district, you can see there, it's a significant increase. It's almost $1 million in what, 3 years? 3 years. So obviously everything where that goes up, that's got to come from somewhere else. So in addition to the pressures we face with revenue, it's increased costs throughout the budget certainly has its impact. And then you can see the rest there. I'm not sure that I can offer too much comment on pretty much whatever stuff there, but if there's any questions, I'll do my best. And then if you flip to page 1, you see that number again. Here it's called general fund grand total. On the revenue side, it was the total operating budget, but they're the same numbers. So this is, to me, this is the number as what it takes to operate the district. You can see below that is preschool. So preschool is a totally separate budget. We are completely funded by the state for our preschool program. It covers pretty much everything, teachers and aides and supplies. And we're very fortunate. Very fortunate the state has elected to fund the preschool programs the way that they have. We're very fortunate to be able to receive that funding. And it certainly helps us to offset our operating costs. I couldn't even begin to tell you what the impact would be if we did not have the preschool program, because it is paying part of the salaries of principal, custodian, librarian, the clericals, the number of all the people, the special area teachers, all the people that come in contact with that program are being charged, part of their salaries are being charged to this grant. So we have to bring all those things back into our budget. If we were not receiving that funding, that would certainly have also an impact. The rest of those things there, everything else is just other smaller grants. You can see that the preschool is a large one. Vocational is our 2 grants. Is that our 2 grants for vocational? I'm sorry, put you on the spot there. Because I see it's a big number there, the 168, 168.
Oh, yes.
That's our 2,
Building
right?
capacity, great. It's
It's our building capacities. We have 2 academies here at the high school. It's our business and our STEM. And so they are funded from the state. They don't go towards salaries, cannot go towards salaries. No. So, it'd be nice if they could, but
they do go towards stipends, but not salaries.
Not salaries, right. So although it looks like a big number, and looks like it could really be helping us off, it's great, and it's a great program, but it's more for the things that are needed for the instructional programs themselves. And that's it for appropriations. So just to kind of finish up this part, always kind of finish up with the tax levy. And it's kind of similar to what it was. It's actually turned out to be pretty close as last year. You look at the difference there, the tax rate increase. We use this average assessed home value of $238,372. You can kind of do a proportion, based on what your assessed value would be to have an idea what that increase would look like. As I mentioned previously, the total tax levy, which you saw on the first page, the $15,642, is only a 1% increase over last year. There is no bank cap, so we will not be discussing that. Bank cap, there is a mechanism by which board can put cap away. We utilized some bank cap last year, and that is the proposed tax levy that is reflected here in this budget. So I'm going to we'll stop right there, because there's going to be a second part of a conversation that we're going to have tonight, about some possible adjustments to this budget. Those adjustments are not to any instructional programs. They are the possibility of looking to take money out of the capital reserve account to address 2 specific areas generally. So I'm going to hold that conversation because I don't want to kind of mess this conversation up with all that. But again, it has nothing to do, again, it will not make any changes, the second conversation, to anything that we've talked about up to this point. Do we want to stop? Is it okay, Mrs. Moore, if we stop, just if there's any questions kind of here before we kind of get into this next layer of the conversation?
Are you taking questions?
Yeah. Mhm.
Special education program.
Yep.
What exactly is being removed in the special education program? For instance, pull-out services.
Okay.
I've emailed you
Okay.
about this.
Yep.
I don't feel like I'm really getting an answer. Is pull-out service going to be, available for my daughter next year? Or is it not, or is it still up in the air?
Okay. You indicated to me in the correspondence that you had been meeting with Mr. Morris, and that you were told that there would not be pull-out services, right?
I had a meeting with her teachers for
Okay.
next year.
Okay.
And it was a rumor that pull-out services may no longer be available next year.
Okay. I would say that certainly is a possibility. I can't say that I can't stand here right now and tell you factually that that's an absolute. I would say that that is absolutely a strong possibility that we will not be able to continue to maintain a pull-out program. Just so everybody understands, so pull-out would be, it's an alternate program we provide in which students are able to be removed from their regular classroom, generally receiving math or ELA instruction in a more small group setting. It's certainly something we think is a benefit to students. It's a nice thing to be able to offer, but unfortunately, it would appear that the likelihood is that we don't have the staffing available in order to be able to support that, if that's what you're being told.
So, my daughter depends on that, for math especially. I see her grades going down tremendously if she didn't have that service. What would happen then?
She's going to certainly have the support of a special education teacher. Will always have the support of a special education teacher. We have a very, I would say, and I should preface this by saying, we had, and I think in most respects we're going to work very hard to maintain, it's only going to be slightly adjusted, a very robust in-class support model. We have what generally has been a co-teach model in which in those grades at the elementary level there is a special education teacher that's in a classroom the entire day. This is the only district I've ever worked with in which that has been the model, where that person was in the entire day. Normally they're only in there for a certain period of minutes, but I think it's great. I'm not going to say that we're going to be able to maintain that 100%. We may have lost one teacher in one of those grades, so one teacher might have to be shared. So it may not be as robust as it was previously, but it's still very, very strong. I certainly can appreciate, the idea of having a child go into another location where it might be quieter and they can remain more focused. It certainly has its
Less distractions.
I can say it has its advantage. There's other schools of thought relative to the pros and cons of that model. I think there's elements in which there's many districts that have done away with the model completely because you want to make sure everyone is getting the same instruction at the same time. Where it can vary a little bit, and it's nice to be able to have that flexibility. But there's some districts that feel that that's not, and we've done everything we could to maintain it. And again, if you've been told that that's a possibility, then I would say it's probably a strong possibility if we're not able to staff that particular class, that particular grade. And I said, things change, and hopefully they can, but unfortunately, that's probably one of the things that could be changing here that's not something that we're happy about. Yes.
Mr. Crispin, the money you were talking about that we're waiting for,
Yes.
you mentioned that if we happen to get it, it would grades K1, possibly 3.
And possibly 4, probably 4.
And probably 4. Does it impact and try to put more basic skills back in, since we're now going from 2, well, what do we have, 2.5 to 1 teacher servicing through the grant, 400 and some students. Well, not 400 and some students, because all of them are obviously not basic skills. 1 basic skills teacher will not be able to service the amount of basic skills kids we have in the district.
I don't think it will, to be very honest. I mean, if it is 500, and again, I said to you, it's not a lot. And when you're looking at the possibility of at least 4 teachers having to be brought back into a budget in order to get us back to 4, I would say that would be a very difficult challenge for any of those monies to be able to address that need. And yes, I think we all agree, it's not where we want to be. No.
It's sad for the kids.
And I'm saying this,
Same as-
certainly these are decisions that we're all going to have to make if we do get the funding, you know, as we take a look at what those priorities, and I come back to, there are the things that are changing. I'm looking at this as if nothing else has changed from the time that we submitted this budget, but they are changing, and people, could potentially be retiring. There are some services next year that we might not have to continue offering that might provide us some significant amount of financial relief. So, not to say it's off the table, I don't think just that extra money will do it. It'll need to take a little bit more over here in order for us to be able to possibly be able to address that need. And then we get into, and I'm just being very straight, then we get into this conversation right here, you know. I mean, we could potentially be losing our co-teach model. I think it's only 1 class. So one would have to kind of maybe be shared between 2 grade levels. But, is the need there stronger than over here? But here is what helps us not to go. The basic skills is what enables us maybe to prevent some students from having to need those kind of specialized services. So that's tough decisions.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, we're not losing the co-teaching model with the current budget?
I think, just off the top of my head, I think there's still 1 teacher, if I look at it, let's just say first, second, third, fourth, and fifth are the 5 grades. But I think there's only 4 for 5, as opposed to now it's 5 for 5. So that's just rough, don't quote me on that. So now if there's only 4 servicing 5 grade levels, somewhere in there's going to have to be some sharing and a little bit of lost time.
And also, when you say 4th grade, for example, going down to 3 classes, do you mean the current 4th grade or next year?
Third.
The current 4th grade?
No, the current 3rd grade going into 4th.
The current 3rd grade going into 4th
Yes.
grade, okay.
Yes.
And, sorry, I'm going from easiest to
Okay.
hardest questions. Is there a more itemized budget that we can request, like more detailed than this one?
That's a good question.
I don't know. It's a very good question. I don't remember the one that's printed out. This is the advertised budget. These are the advertised appropriations. The only other budget that I'm aware of is called a user-friendly budget that we post on the website. I think this, as I look at it, is more detailed than that one, or they're very, very similar. I can, if you send me an email, I will check, but no, I think this is it. This is it here.
Sorry, one other question I told you I was
Yeah.
gonna ask about
Okay.
last time. The athletics budget is going up by $200,000. And I'm just curious, like that's potentially another teacher, I assume, or a basic skills instructor. Do you know where that?
No,
it-
there's
it
no
says,
increase.
Well, maybe I'm reading it wrong. School-sponsored athletics instruction going from 310,000 to 510,000 under advertised appropriations.
Line is up.
It's in
Under
the general fund.
Current expenses for instruction.
So school-sponsored athletics, I don't have an answer.
thank you. I have two more questions. So, aside from the elementary school, are teachers being cut from any of the other schools?
Yes, there are reductions at the junior, senior high school level. I want to say not as much, and that's because they got hit hard last year because of the combination and bringing the junior high and senior high together. There were significant reductions. Almost one of every content area was reduced last year. So this year, I think it's more at the junior high level as we look at the schedule and some of the programs we offer there. So there are at least two, if not maybe three, that will be impacted.
Thank you. And my last question, I know that this is an extremely complex topic, and you were the board and you were very helpful in helping me understand this last year. However, this budget seems really dire, to say the least. And I am once again just curious what possibilities were on the table, whether closing the high school was on the table at all. If so, if it wasn't, how was it investigated and determined that that wasn't a viable option? And if not, why not? And I'll say again, I'm not necessarily in favor of closing the high school. I have seen very strong students come out of it, but I just feel like all options really need to be explored. And as a concerned parent, I want to know that due diligence is being done to explore even drastic options when class sizes are increasing and teachers are being reduced. So that's my final question.
No, it was not. I'm going to just say from a personal perspective and not from a personal opinion perspective, but is it dire? Yes. Is it where we want to be? Certainly not where we want to be, but I think we certainly can still function extremely effectively as a school district. Although we may not have all the supports we'd like to have, and we've talked about two of them here already, class size is going to be up there, but I came in here last year and we had classes because of the imbalances between the two schools that were getting up into those upper 20s. We had it, and we functioned very well. The co-teaching model will certainly is a high priority in order to maintain, because having two teachers in a classroom, especially for those students that need supports, is very effective and certainly is very costly too, but I think we've worked hard to keep that. So I don't think that we're to the point where we still can't be successful. We're at a point where maybe you're right. I think beyond this, I don't see any way. If we were to, let's say, hypothetically have another $1 million loss next year, I think your point's well taken. That definitely at that point, we're going to have to do everything we can to look at what other alternatives there may be, because I don't think there is any further we can go beyond where we will be next year if this is where we are. So maybe it does give the board a chance, an opportunity to evaluate those alternatives. Our hope is that, through some changes in the funding formula, changes we made where we will not be impacted the way we've been impacted. I think the potential of the additional relief that we could realize, it's going to get us back to pretty close to where we are. If we can get back to 4 classes, which I think will be a high priority, if we can add any of these other supports, which I think is a good possibility, we're not really that bad yet. And so that's kind of where we are.
Mr. Crispin, if I could
Yep,
just
yes,
add
yep.
real quick to Mrs. Reed's point. Just for clarification, the board does do our own independent investigations in terms of, ideas that we have, and we certainly do our due diligence and research, but because we are a public school district that offers a current high school, we would be required by statute 18A 7F 33-2.1 to put it before the voters. So that's not a decision that we can as a board make, and it impacts this budget.
I understand that. I guess presumably you would be doing research before you presented it to the voters.
I mean, I think that we've shared, you and I have had a number of conversations where I've shared the due diligence that we've done as a board to educate ourselves about the variety of offerings and configurations and cost savings versus expenditures that would likely be associated with any of those decisions. So admittedly, I think that this board does I think we do a really nice job of making sure that we're making fully informed decisions. And I would say on this particular topic, I would estimate that we've probably put in 500 plus hours. And, you know, I've shared some of those things with you in the past. I don't know that there's a stone that's not been, you know, that's been left unturned.
Thank you.
And if I could just, I'll add a personal comment, and I know people will perceive my personal comment as being unbiased, you know, being a person from Pitman, but I'm gonna tell you, I've been to a lot of places, good places. There's nothing like this. There's nothing like this. And to let it go too quickly could be a big mistake. I don't think we realize the type of atmosphere our children are being educated in here. It's like nothing else out there, and I've been to some really, really good places. And I didn't know this until I came here. It's not until you kind of get inside these walls you really start to realize how special this place is. So, you know, I certainly, I say to the board, we never really had the conversation, but I would ask that they be very careful in that decision-making process, because sometimes I don't think we realize how good we do have it here, and it's not always, you know, greener on the other side, and it could bring in a whole host of issues. So hopefully people realize that. Hopefully we can increase the number of students who continue. We still have lots that are applying to come here as tuition students, which helps us on that revenue side. So it's very special. Yes.
Can I ask for the kind of the lower grades what the maximum amount of kids in the class are? Because I have a daughter in second now. My son's going to come into kindergarten. I guess they were saying that there could be as many as 26 kids in the kindergarten
Yeah.
class. Which seems enormous.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that
you can
size.
almost be guaranteed there will be 4 kindergarten teachers. And
Okay.
we know that, and we've talked about that. You know, when we're having these conversations, it's 3 months ago, and you're looking at early numbers, and we have seen the numbers, a little bit of an uptick, and we know that that's the almost 100% probability that the kindergarten will have to be 4.
Okay.
And it's kind of where we were last year in the same time. We were cutting to 3, but then numbers jumped a little bit, so we will certainly be addressing that. But right now, as we look at numbers, I would say on an average, they're all kind of in that ballpark. They're in that like 75 to a little bit close to an 80 range. So, you know, you're looking at 25, 26, 27, maybe 28 students in some of those classrooms, potentially, if there's 3 teachers. And of course, if there's 4, if we're looking at 80, now we're back down to lower 20s, where we like to be.
And then just the decision, I guess, to decide like if we can add back in to the teachers, is it based solely just on how many kids are in the class or which grade level they're at?
You know, the nice thing is, I said through the doors, they're pretty much kind of all there. It's not like you have one that's way down. We do have the one, I'm sorry. We have the one that's in first grade right now that will stay as 3 going into second grade. But other than that, the rest of them are in that 75 to 80, which means they're going to be high 20s if we are 3, and they're going to be in the low 20s if we have 4. Again, the optimism, and we're trying to think positive. Unfortunately, it's a little bit different this year with the additional funding than it was last year, because it's not just S2 districts. We're hoping it goes through, and if it does, then I think certainly we can address the needs, at least at the classroom level. All right, we're going to shift gears now, because there's 2 things that the board has to discuss tonight. On the agenda, there is a motion to accept the bids. I talked a little bit about capital projects fund and the project that we have here at the high school, the HVAC system. And they'll be accepting the bids tonight. Tonight, as they accept the bids, we were very, very fortunate. We had a bid that was like right on the dollar amounts. So we have the budget to be able to support that. That bid only includes the gymnasium and the weight room. The reason the gymnasium and the weight room were separated is because, if you're familiar with those 2 spaces, they have open ceilings, which means, generally speaking, the installation is kind of pretty much the same. Everything can be seen. When you go into the locker rooms, they do not have open ceilings. They're closed ceilings. So there's this question of what's behind them. They got to tear the ceilings down. They got to clear everything out. Then they have to install the systems. Then they got to put up a new ceiling. So in the gymnasium, the weight room, you're looking at a project that's like $900 and some thousand. And tonight they'll be considering an alternate bid for the locker rooms at about $400,000. Now you might be saying, oh geez, that's almost close to half. And you have these 2 small spaces. But again, there's a lot involved in a smaller space that's not involved in the bigger spaces. So tonight, you know, the board will have to discuss whether or not they want to consider this alternate bid. And so what we're going to do now, sent this out to the board. Well, I want to make sure I have some here. I have some. This is actually part of the budget documentation. Everybody get one? I got it. So this is part of the advertised budget. It's called a recapitulation of balances. And this is kind of just indicating, this is, you know, as I said, part of the public information that's shared, kind of where some of the balances are in these savings accounts that the board has. So on the first page, you can see just what the budgeted fund balance is. We looked at these numbers earlier. We can see the monies that have been appropriated over the last couple years. And if you look at number 8 down the left-hand side, which is ending balance 630, you can kind of see where the concern is. The concern is at one time we had over $3 million kind of in this excess accounts. Then it went down to 1.4 in 23-24, and now it's down to 259. This is that savings account we've been drawing from to kind of help balance the budget over here. And it's running low. And we need to kind of start to kind of back off this number if we can. But yet it's hard to back off that number when you need that to kind of support the things we want to support. So it's a real juggling act right now. I just want to highlight this concern. It's not something I am personally happy to leave to a new administration to have to deal with in the future, but it is what it is. So that's the first piece. But there's really nothing for us to even consider there, but I just wanted to highlight those issues. So if we flip over to the back side, starting with number 26, this is the capital reserve account. This is the money the board has over many, many years put aside for any type of capital projects. So a similar capital project to what we're going to talk about would have been the roof last summer, not last summer, 2 summers ago, at the middle school, elementary school. It was replaced, over $1 million project. Board put the money away, transfers the money back into the budget. They're able to do the project. You can see there, if you follow it all the way down, that for 24-25, if you go down to number 37, the ending balance on June 30th will be about $1.15 million. That's how much the board currently has in this capital reserve account that they can tap into if they want to do a capital project. So that's what we're going to be talking about here tonight. It's not something that generally you would use for the budget because it's a one-time revenue source. And for one-time revenue sources, they're great one time, but when they go away, everything you pay for with that revenue source has to go away. It's one of the disadvantages of this additional aid that we're going to receive. I didn't mention it then, but I'll mention it now. If we do get $500,000, just like last year we got $900,000, you know it's great, and it helped us to save 5 positions. But then when that money went away, technically we had to get rid of those positions. You know, we try to get them into the budget. Other positions may have had to come and go. It'll be the same thing, you know, in this particular instance here. If we get the 500, you know, we'll bring back 5 or 6 whatever positions, but as far as the future is concerned, there'll be challenges. So these are, again, capital money, so we do have $1.1 million available to use. In addition to that, I just want to kind of make note, remember there's this project. It costs about $1.2 million. Right? The board eventually will be getting 40% of that money back. The state will, you know, reimburse them 40%. That money comes back in, it'll go into this capital project. So 40% is roughly $475,000. That's going to get added to you. So the board has those monies to work with. So the first thing that has to be decided is whether the board, and I'm really talking to the board I guess right now, but whether we want to approve the alternate bid to do the locker rooms. The alternate bid's about $406,000, and we would have to have a motion to approve that. Monies would come out of the capital reserve accounts, and then you'd have a complete project. You know, if not, you're going to. You know, we've talked about the situation in which you're going to have an air-conditioned gymnasium and weight room, locker rooms, and you know, is this something you want to do out of this pot of money, Or is it something you kind of hold off to the referendum? We already know, if you've been involved in the conversations, the referendum monies are very limited. There's not a whole lot there that the board can go out in terms of bonding, and it's going to be very limited in terms of what they can do. We probably need to find a balance in these two areas as far as utilizing monies from the capital reserve and try not having to add these projects to the referendum. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that we've been talking about is the moving of the administrative offices at Memorial School. As we continue to expand the preschool program, things are getting very tight at Memorial. And the possibility of moving administrative offices, we're looking at the possibility of using the Wall School, utilizing the space in the back of Wall School, which would be the library and the former computer lab, and kind of making that kind of the central office area. That would free up the office where the central office is currently located. The main office would be able to move over into that area. They would have that area plus a couple smaller areas for small group instruction. The office across the hall, which is currently the main office in the Memorial School, would be repurposed for a classroom, because it was a classroom before it was the main office. The administrative offices that are there now was the main office at one time. And then we're also looking at repurposing some smaller group areas down at the end of the building that are currently used for speech and different therapies, because we'll be capturing some small group areas in the current central administrative offices, as well as where the child study team is currently located, and they would be converted back into classrooms. Right now we're a little tight on space for special area teachers, sharing spaces, and it's just tight. So I think that would enable that building to be able to house its eventual maximum population. We're moving to 9 preschools next year, which is really close. According to the state, we need 10. And they are pushing us very hard to make sure that we have enough space for our maximum population. Maximum population is usually taking your first grade class, just multiply by 2. Remember, we have 3 and 4-year-olds. That's your maximum population. And we're not quite there with our 9 classrooms. We're there for next year from the perspective that everyone who wants to come to the program has a seat in the program. But certainly there might be others out there that are not currently utilizing the program, that might want to utilize the program in the future, which might have to push us to the 10 classrooms. So that's the other project. We have received some quotes for the work. It's just a matter of framing out the areas, painting, making some adjustments in HVAC, but as you can imagine, none of this is cheap. Probably looking at a project that's going to be close to $100,000 to $200,000 altogether. Again, if the board's desires to move in that direction, that would also come out of capital projects monies that they do have available to them. So,
Would you like us to have a discussion on
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Okay.
we need to talk.
Okay. So the one item that I would add is it pertains to the conversation. They're kind of two separate issues, is it the administration move and the HVAC, is that we were approved for a ROD grant for the HVAC, and I would caution members of the board to give consideration to the governor's budget address for fiscal year 25. Currently, there are no funds allocated for projects like these to what are called ROD districts, regular operating districts. That's why this is a ROD grant. There's $75 million that was allocated last year. That's been reduced down to $50 million, and the only districts that will be eligible to apply for those funds are SDA districts, or what were formerly called AVID districts. So there will not be this type of grant funding available for our projects, so the state share of the locker room portion we would not be eligible for based upon the preliminary information from the governor's budget. And I would admit also, I think is probably likely to carry forward based on the conversations that I've overheard at the Assembly and Senate in terms of interest or appetite for funding regular operating district programs. So if you choose to push this to our referendum, we would be eligible for those debt shared services. So, you know, the state does absorb a portion of those type of projects in a referendum. But in terms of the straight 40% coverage, that funding is not budgeted for next year. So again, that only pertains to the locker room and the HVAC in the gym that we were awarded the grant for.
So currently it's covered by the ROD.
40% of it,
40%.
approximately. Really, it's still not quite funded at that.
Softballs.
Not softballs, but
I'm over that.
it's still not fully funded at the appropriate,
Yeah,
I think it was 35.6%.
yeah, they want us to round up.
But that, so that was one of the conversations that was kind of heavily discussed, is that we know we have this crumbling infrastructure throughout the state, and not just in SDA districts, but in districts like ours, regular operating districts, and there's no funding allocated currently for those types of projects next year. So that legislative relief that was offered to us, I think starting in 2022, that opened up those grant cycles, won't be there.
So basically, if we're not paying for it ourselves, it's not getting done and it's gonna fall apart.
I don't know about that, but I'm just cautioning us that we'll lose the opportunity to have 40% of it off the top,
So it's
paid by
safer
the
to do
state.
it now.
Oh, if we do it now, okay.
Right, because it's in our
Sorry, I
initial
thought
ROD
you meant
grant
that wasn't an
application.
option.
Yeah, but
Okay,
then it won't be an option next.
gotcha.
Currently,
Okay.
there's no allocation
Yes.
for ROD
Okay.
grants in the fiscal 25-year budget.
Following year, okay.
So next year, if there were projects that we identified, like, I don't know if you guys remember, we submitted two. One was for this project, the second one was for the track and the drainage issue, but they didn't make it that far down the list. They prioritized
Right.
HVAC projects and stuff, so we were fortunate to get this ROD grant, but that's one of the line items that's been cut for next year. I will also say that there were conversations at the Senate about the state giving some consideration to going out for bonds because of our bond rating for facilities projects. So there could be greater opportunities in the future, and that's something that we kind of want to keep an eye on in terms of the conversation surrounding that, because that could be advantageous to us as we look at a referendum process, and we know that we have $80+ million in facility needs that were identified in the 2021 facility study, and those are 2021 prices. So, maybe some of those funding opportunities will increase, but that's the one piece. But that is, again, separate from the administration office, because that was not part of the ROD grant. But who has thoughts? Anyone?
I mean, I don't think we have an option not to move
The
our
administration.
offices.
Yeah, so
In my
it's-
opinion.
And then what about the locker room? What is your thought process on the locker
Well,
room?
I'd say if we can still get 40% back, I'm sorry, 36 point. If we can still get any portion of a ROD grant, then we should move forward now, because we're gonna end up paying for it in the long run. We're gonna need to, if we can get extra money from who we can for this grant, then I say we need to move forward with it now.
I agree. And prices could always go up too.
Right.
Can I be very clear? I'm sorry, I might have missed something. We're not looking for any reimbursement for this potential alternate bid, correct?
I thought that was encompassed in the original ROD grant application.
No.
Oh, the locker room's not in.
Where was that at? No, just kidding.
I want to make sure I'm right in that.
I'm
So,
just teasing.
so the 1.2 would be the bid for the HVAC system
Right.
and the soft cost.
So that is the 1.8.
That's the 1.187 number that was approved by the ROD grant.
Okay, so
Okay.
these are not included in that.
I'm sorry, was that?
So they're not, the locker room was not included in the ROD grant. Well, that changes
Well-
the entire conversation, I think.
Correct, that's why I want to make sure we're very clear on it.
Okay.
Is it included, kind of, yeah, if the bid had come in at like 600,000 and the locker room came in at 300,000 and now it's a 900,000 total, then it would have been part of the ROD grant. I mean, not knowing what the bids were going to be, I think that's why they didn't want to take the chance of putting the locker rooms in the base bid, because then there was a concern that the bid would be over the grant, so that they pulled that out and made that an alternate bid, just to kind of give us the flexibility to ensure we could get something.
So the balance between that 949 and the ROD grant, that difference is
Correct.
not applicable to, like, we cannot apply that to the alternate project either. Or you're saying that's absorbed by soft costs?
Yeah, I think that represents most of the soft cost, 25% roughly of a project, as we know, as we're talking the referendum. We know that's soft cost, the engineering that's going to go into that. So if there could be a few dollars that
Yeah.
could be used if it's left over, that could be moved over to handle the locker room project, but I don't think it's going to be that much.
Okay.
So that portion is not really eligible for the ROD
So-
grant.
I would say probably not in at
Okay.
least this type of a conversation. So we know we're gonna get the 40% back, which is the 475, which is more than enough to cover the locker rooms. So in essence, I'm saying, in essence, the locker rooms and the gymnasium are in the 1.1987 number. So yes, you could argue yes, but
But we would get those funds back whether we do the locker room or not.
we got the 1.187, we're getting 40% of that back, which is about 475, which is about the cost of the alternate bid. So if you want to look at it, yeah, we're getting 40% of the project and kind of paying the soft costs separately out of capital. If you look at it that way. That makes sense.
Because in the budget, we didn't have that 475 needed for anything, like, it wasn't really allocated for, so we can put it towards another
Oh,
project.
yes, not allocated,
And
no.
it'll just like kind
Yep,
of
we
wash.
just had to pay it up front, knowing we're going to get it back, and then it was just going to be put right back into the capital reserve account.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, the money's there, it's just,
Right.
you know, do we anticipate other purposes? You know, as we look at the needs in the district, and you've had a conversation about the referendum, we know that that's somewhat limiting. So finding a nice balance between the referendum and what might go out there, and obviously we know that needs to get approved, and making sure that we have, you know, some monies left in a capital reserve account to address some things that are not going to be in the referendum.
And didn't we have an issue moving the offices for bathrooms? I don't see that on here.
No, we don't have an issue with moving the offices for bathroom. We had issue with using the first floor of Walls as a preschool, because there's no bathrooms on the first floor.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest scenario, the bathrooms are in the basement there at Walls School, but, you know, it's just to walk down the steps.
I think we should sit on the locker rooms for now. I don't think we should spend that money.
What do they currently have? Do they have air conditioners? Is there anything, I don't, yeah.
Locker rooms?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
not.
nothing on that end of the building has air conditioning, have heat. Both of them are utilizing the same system, but.
Do they have, there's no windows, I assume, right?
Will they give us a break if we put it in this time around? Can we negotiate a number if we
I
say
feel like it
bid.
costs more to do
I
it
know.
later, any project like that. They're already doing the one,
right, is it gonna be more the next time they come in and we have to eat the soft cost again, or?
Not to
Whatever.
sway you, but remember, you've paid for the soft cost for the locker rooms. You paid for the design, because they did the design in order to get the bid. And you've already paid them probably 80% of their fee already. So you paid for something that you may now not get a benefit from if, and I'm not trying to push you one way or the other, I'm just trying to make sure we have a good picture of how all this works.
Okay. Thoughts?
This is fun. I don't know. I would say that we should just take the money and do the, my vote would probably be to go ahead and do the locker rooms. Do it all.
yeah.
I mean, the money's
think our
there.
List for
We can't use it
referendum
to save
is
teachers
long,
anyway, so,
Yeah, you can't use it for that.
I mean, it's not gonna help us bring back basic skills teachers or anything like that, so. Dave?
I'm with Stacy.
Melissa? Mr. Farrell?
I'm leaning towards doing it.
I just think we keep looking at the what ifs, and if we do it now instead of doing it later, we've got to actually worry about now.
Waiting.
Like taking that money and holding on to it, that if we need it next year for something else. I just get nervous taking that money and using it instead of banking it, but that's just my personal feeling.
Right.
I understand that doing it all at once definitely makes sense, and that's not, I just have a problem spending that money right now.
So, Mr. Crispin, what would our balance be once we receive the return of ROD grant funds? So we would have $474,000 in our capital maintenance? That is
To
what-
add to, so your capital maintenance account, based as it stands right now, will have a balance of the 1.159 come June 30th. All right? If we get the 40% back, that's another 475,000. So you can add 475,000 to that number. I'm gonna make that 500. You're gonna have about $1.5-6 million available when you get that reimbursement, that 40% back. And that's paying for the gym and the locker room. That's done. That's out of there. So 1.6 million is what you have available
Okay,
for the two projects that we're talking about right now.
okay. And I'm just looking at the bids.
We have the. Like the
I mean, we would
I mean,
still,
we
that
do
would
have
be a
the
decent amount still in
bond,
reserve.
yeah, we do,
then
and we do still have the
I'm just
bond
thinking,
coming up.
we want to
and-
be smart with our monies if we've already spent on the soft cost. That's a waste.
Right, and my other thing is if we have the other projects coming in with the bonds and stuff, like, I don't know, what are we worried about in the long run of spending? You're just an OIC guy.
You know, I don't know, automobile manufacturer says replace hub bearings at 60,000 miles. I've never replaced a hub bearing that didn't make a noise. You get 90, 100,000 out of them.
Yeah, but I thought these were actually done.
So that leaves us about 280 in our capital reserve.
I'm not a fix it if it ain't broke, but that's me.
Yeah.
I agree, and I also am
Wait,
apprehensive.
there can't be, we don't have anything in there
How
now,
long do you
so
spend
they're
in the
not
locker room?
broken.
10 minutes before gym
You have
class?
heat.
10
You
minutes
have
after
heat.
gym
Right.
class?
Yeah.
So this is replacing
I think sports.
Heat.
and
Correct.
adding
Adding,
a
yeah.
There's no pool.
six.
I
Okay.
was- The school I went to had it was built in the 1910s, before anyone gets the image of a luxurious school. And it had a 5-lane pool in the basement, and we had to blow dry our hair in said locker room. So I'd really be advocating differently if we were in that same boat. I struggle with the perspective that while I agree students aren't in there very long, there are no outside windows. And
There's no
admittedly,
circulating.
yeah, that's where I'm
And
kind
if
of.
we're doing all the other spaces around it, it's almost silly.
A big pedestal fan will blow a lot of air around.
I don't know what Cusack says about that, but I'm confident.
I mean, I didn't die, right? We didn't die going good.
No, but we didn't have any air conditioning and anything, so, but now that's like, everyone needs air conditioning.
we all have it.
But yes, we didn't have air conditioning in my house growing up either, and now I do, so.
Right. Okay, so,
Ugh. We have to decide tonight?
yes.
We do.
Oh, boy. All right.
So, I think that
This is an easy
we,
meeting.
let's clear the easy one. I think we have kind of had this discussion as a facilities committee regarding the move for the administrative offices. We
Yeah,
think that
that's a
Yes.
no-brainer.
Yes.
We need the
necessary.
space memorial,
needs to
that
happen.
answers
Just so we can
itself.
put some numbers to this, because I've given you a sheet there of the quotes that we've received so far. I think comes out to about 150. Still some things to be determined. We're looking at probably a ballpark of 200,000, but maybe a little bit for some supplies and for the things that we're going to be doing, some internal. So maybe 2 to 225 would probably be. Remember, and anything that's not used just goes right back in. It's not like it can be used somewhere else because it's going to be designated.
Here.
About 225 is probably what we're looking at to make sure, because the problem is if we come up short, we really don't have anywhere to go to make sure it gets done. We want to make sure we have a little bit more that we can put back that's not used. So if we could just say 225 there,
That leaves us 56,000.
for relative to what?
If our capital reserve balance after this project and with the ROD grant left us 281.
Yeah, a lot more than that.
Well,
Where are we at? We're going to have about 1.15.
Yeah.
Okay, 1.15 is what we have now, right?
Yeah.
Plus
And
the
we're gonna-
474.
Plus the 474.
So we got to 1.6,
Yep, so we can subtract out 225,
right?
so that's what we'd have left. And now, it's whether or not we want to do the alternate bid or not.
And these two bids together,
No, you don't have to take
No.
out the other one.
We
You
already
only
did.
have to take out the
I want to
475.
talk about we're only talking about the 406.
Yeah, 406. So we're at
The 937 for the
1.6,
gym's
and
done,
it's
and the
406
grant.
for that.
474 of that.
So we're still at 1.2, basically.
No, the 474 is on the total cost, including soft costs.
Right, that we get returned to us.
Right. We
Right.
get returned of 1.3, or whatever, 1.275, whatever it was.
That's why you came up with 403.
Now, 403 is the amount of the alternate bid. That's what
Right.
we'd have to approve, 403, 406,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Right.
That's what it costs to do the locker rooms. Base bid for the gymnasium was like $949, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's not, I just looked at
Nine
it.
something, 986, I have it in front of me. 949, 6, yep. And then 4036 is the,
Yeah, 4036.
And you're looking at 403, you probably at least need maybe 25,000 as a contingency, change orders. Because
Yeah, I think it's at 20.
You do not know what's behind those ceilings, so they recommended about that amount. You can round it off if you wanted.
when was the, do we know when the locker room was put in? Part of the original construction of the building? Okay.
Which was what, 75 or something, was it?
72.
72?
72, I think.
Is it our newest building?
So you're looking at about 430, 431. If you put that contingency in there.
Is that what this is?
Melissa? Mrs. Farrell? I think we're operating like a committee meeting. I'm forgetting everyone's last name. Really dropping the ball.
She's.
Mrs. Farrell? Thoughts?
Yes. Oh.
I'm going
Final
yes.
thoughts? Mr. Grossman?
On gym, or the locker rooms, I'm still no.
Mrs. Phil?
I say yes.
I'm still a no.
Okay.
Do we know where that puts us?
Yeah. 3-2.
In a stalemate.
3-2. Okay, so
4-2.
4-2?
Okay. 1, 2, 3,
I didn't
4.
vote. I didn't chime in.
She'd
I wanted to wait. I was playing my cards to see,
Yeah, you
like,
know
let it
where
play
you're
out,
at.
and let
I
everyone
know
else
where you're
commit,
at.
and then
I know
see
where
where we
you're
were
at.
at, and then, decide if I had to die on a hill. Okay. Are there other discussions that we need to have as it pertains to the budget, Mr. Kristen?
Well, this is all part of the budget.
Right.
Because now we have to
Well, we have to
Do
walk
some
on
math.
motions, right?
Have to do some math here because we need to make some changes to the budget to reflect whatever it is the board's desire is to do. So we're going to work through that process. So we know where we are?
Yes.
Because I just handed out an agenda that's in red of the areas that we're going to have to look and modify.
Sorry.
Just what do you do? No, you're fine.
So if you'd like to follow along, so if you turn to page 2 of 3, at the top, we need to determine the first number, which is the amount of revenue we're going to add or take from capital reserve to put into the budget. And if I understood correctly, we used 225 as the number for the offices. And I come out with 431, which is the 406 plus 25, the contingency that was recommended by the architects as 431, 225. So I come out with 656,000. That math be correct? Trying to solve.
Yep.
All right, so that is the number that needs to go into that line, that we're going to change the budget. So on the 10307, capital reserve is going to change from 30,000, because that's what's in there now. I think it was to address a couple rooms and some carpeting. We're going to change that to 656 plus the 30. It's already there. So we want that number to be 6, so that 30 is already coming out of capital reserve. It's already reflected in that balance.
Well, that's
6,
contingent if the locker room passed then?
Yeah.
Right.
yep. So the number that's going in that line is 686,000.
Wait, 686 or
686, so it's 56 plus the 30 that's already there.
Oh, okay,
So when we change the budget to send it into the county, it'll reflect 686. Now we have to break that down into the individual line items that are going to be used to cover these costs. And generally speaking, in a construction project, it's pretty easy. There's not much. I would recommend, like under contracted services, we're going to have to bring some people in that may not be any of these generals, whether it's security or whether it's doors and access. So maybe $10,000 there, just as a ballpark is what I was given. General supplies for some of the things we may be doing internally. Mark and I sat and made $15,000 there. And so if it's 225 total for the administrative offices, that leaves a balance of 200 for the overall general construction. So on those three lines, we would be changing on line 45100, contracted services would change from 23,350 to 33,350, $10,000. General supplies would go up by 15,000 from 2,500 to 15 plus 2,500, which would be 17,500. And for the administrative offices, we have it 0 to 200,000 for the administrative offices. So that reflects the administrative offices, and the only thing we need to do is to add in the additional amount for the locker rooms to that last one, construction services, because the locker rooms are all construction services. We're awarding a bid to a contractor. So the full amount of what we're adding in, which is, remind me again, 431?
403,600.
Well, 431.
431 was the total, right? Because we added the 25 for the contingency, I just rounded it off.
Yeah.
So it's 431 plus the 200,000 is 631. 0, 0, 0 on that one.
Don't we add that twice then? Didn't we add it in the first line?
It's, the first line is the revenue, the second one we just did is the expenditure, and they have to balance.
Okay. Oh, all right, yeah.
So that top number, the 686, should now balance with those numbers that we just put on the expenditures. 10,000, 33, 350, 17, 500, and the 631. Somebody could do that math to make sure that that adds up to the 686. Somebody got that? 33, 350, 17, 500.
Stacy's doing it old school. She's adding it.
I think it would have been quicker.
So I get, she gets 681, 850.
That's all now, it's all I know, I'm doing it.
What'd you get?
681, 850. 681, 850. What did you get?
Did you have that? Was
gotta
the
carry
third
the
one
two.
200?
I got like
The
831.
third one is 631.
That's combined with those two.
Right.
Okay.
681. Yes,
Yeah.
Right. So we're a little off there.
Yeah, I think I said this incorrectly. They
Yeah,
don't
I
have to
feel
be,
like-
they're not equal to each other. So we have to make sure that what we have added in terms of this additional cost, which is the 10,000, the 15,000, which is 25,000, the 200,000, which is the 225,
Oh, you gotta take these off, probably.
and then we're adding also in the 431. That's where we get the 656.
656 or 686?
6,
56. I see what you mean.
56,
I-
yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now
we're
I
good.
understood where we got that.
yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
It was this one. It was like, that's where I went.
Okay.
Thanks.
Because this.
I'm over here adding pen and
10 grand.
paper. Not sure if I carried the one.
Yeah, I know.
One of our teachers helped us out.
Too soon for a Common Core math joke? You just round up.
Let me just stay with this for a second. I apologize, but I'm not. So for the line, it says capital reserve, 30,000. We are adding to that 225, 0, 0, 0. And we're adding to that 431, correct? That's 56,000. And then I think what you were saying, April, is what you now have to add that number to the 30,000. That's what goes on that top line is the 686, correct?
Right,
Yes.
because it reflects the 30,000
Yes.
plus.
So that's what goes on that line when we make the motion. And then down below, these two things aren't necessarily equal because there's other things that are in those budgetary numbers to the left-hand side. The 23,350 represents something outside of this. The 2,500 is something outside this. But we're adding in 10,000 to the first one, 15,000 to the second one, and 631 to the last one. And I think those numbers there add up to the, do they add up to?
631, so
I'm
it's
doing
really
myself
not.
up.
This, right? It's really this.
681,850.
And then it goes
It's just the 10,000.
15,000?
2350, so up to 33,350, right?
So is that only up to, is that only?
You're taking contracted services from 23,350.
What I want to do is I want to compare apples to apples first. So I just want to take the 10,000 we're adding in plus the 15,000.
Mhm.
15 plus 10 plus the 200.
31. Yeah, I'm getting 656 on the bottom.
Yep.
Oh, 656 plus the 30 there that it was, right?
Plus the 431, right? You did the 431. 656, plus
the
the,
30.
so 656 is what those numbers should come out to.
Right.
And that matches what's being added to the top to then to the 30 to get the new number. So as far as the motion is concerned, as far as expenditures, it's going to change from 23,350, we're adding 10,000 to 33,350. It's changing from 2,500 to 17,500 and from 0 to 631. I think we're good. So there's some other changes, so let's make sure we're good. On the next one down where you see the 30 in the dark red, we're increasing the capital reserve by the 656 plus the 30, so that line now is 686. Approval to withdraw from reserves for the 24-25 school year is now 686. You have a motion at the bottom of the page to approve the alternate bid from Pulaska for the 403. That's all you need to do. Does not need to include the contingency. All we're approving is the actual motion itself. And we got to go back to the front page. And change those numbers that start at the bottom. So we now know that 30, just by looking at the page before this one, goes from 30 to 686. And we have to add to the general fund. The general fund already has the 30,000 in there, so we're only adding the 656 to that number. And adding 656 to the last number. And if everybody has calculators, if we could all do that together and see what we come up with.
To the total or the general fund? I mean, to both, I recognize that, but do we need to amend these motions?
You haven't made the motion, so there's nothing to amend. We're actually hopefully going to make the motion correctly when we do it, right?
Okay. Well,
So the 22 million plus the 686?
Yes, what is that?
23,457, 644.
23, go ahead,
457,
457,
644.
644.
Is that right? I didn't use my calculator.
Wait, did
Say it
you
again,
do
what'd you
6?
say?
Did you do
Oh, mine will
686
work.
or 656?
650, should be 656. right?
23, 457,
No.
644.
One more time, 23.
457,
Yep.
644.
Oh my
And did you
goodness.
use the 656?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my word.
And
And then the
26,
second
not
number,
killing it.
26,
You got it?
427,
27,
127,
One,
plus
two.
656.
same thing,
I'm
yep.
gonna stop adding.
Is that
27083, 127.
127.
minus 30? I'm sorry.
Right, that's what I did the first time.
Say that one more time, Dave.
Oh, I just did clear, you're killing me, Smalls.
You know he clears things real quick.
You know I don't save anything.
Okay.
Like the funding
I
formula.
think you said
26,
27, 0,
427,
83, 127.
127 plus 656, 000. 27, 083, 127.
So we have those two new numbers on the front page. At the bottom, 686. Adjustments on the second page, and the recommendation for. Any questions, I guess, on anyone relative to the agenda that will be voted upon?
All right, so is there any discussion from the board regarding either the hearing or the pending motions, the public budget hearing? Is there any discussion before we get started?
No, my brain is fried.
I know. So I want to add that the board prioritizes, and this is something we commonly discuss, the class sizes. That's obviously a huge area that we focus on in these discussions when we talk about any funding sources that may be returned to us or state aid that could change. This is not ideal, and I think that we're hopeful that there will be change. I think one of the conversations that we're hearing from a legislative advocacy perspective is that the S2, Senate Bill 2 sunsets this year, and that in its place, fiscal year 26 will need to have some type of funding formula that breaks down how the state funds are allocated to districts that is not currently reflected within the SFRA. I mean, it is, they can revert back to the original statute, but that hold harmless provision then would be, I guess, actionable. So that's a conversation that we just continually have as a board, and that's something that we hope to have a seat at that table to the best of our abilities to make sure that we're advocating for districts like ours, and we just continue to explore every resource. But we'll also share that we did appeal our state aid numbers this year. We are only permitted by statute to appeal one area within your state aid, and that's your aggregate income. So I want to thank Mrs. Rose. She was able to provide us with some additional guidance on that. But we are extremely limited in how we pursue that appeal request, and all we can do is hope that the state recognizes that there's some outliers in the information that they collect from the Department of Treasury and Division of Taxation as it pertains to our aggregate income. There's a number of items that are included in your aggregate income that I find very interesting. One of the anomalies that they talk a lot about is you could have someone win the lottery, and it could greatly impact how your state aid is calculated within your communities. And that's a non-taxable source, where obviously we don't tax income within as a school district. So to use that in the funding formula is kind of challenging. But I won't go on about the funding formula any longer. But I just want to share with members of the public that we recognize the challenges of this budget, and we're hopeful that we will see some level of relief to kind of mitigate some of these difficult decisions that have to be made. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Committee Chairman, Mr. Grossman. I know we didn't meet, but if you want to move the motion.
Make a motion to move items 1 and 2 as written. No, that's not on the bottom.
This one, as amended.
Yeah, just
Well, not amended, doesn't have a motion.
Okay.
1 as we just finalized, as written. Do I have to repeat those numbers?
Yep, we got it.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second, Bolton.
Okay, we've already had discussion. Mr. Crispin, please call the vote.
No, it's fine, huh?
Oh, no, wait. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That's the budget.
There's the budget, right? We're gonna
Oh,
vote on
it's
that.
It's finance and facilities. We have two
That's why I was
subsections
good,
here.
there's 2.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Let's do that one first.
So the first
Okay.
motion is to approve the budget
Yeah.
as we just finalized.
Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
okay. Yep, sounds good.
Ms. Bolton?
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mrs. Pope?
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo?
Yes.
And Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, Mr. Grossman, I'll turn it back over to
And
you.
I make a second motion to approve items 1 through 2 on the agenda as written.
I have a second?
Second, Bolton.
Mr. Grossman, please call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Bolton?
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mrs. Pope?
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo? Mrs.
Yes.
Miller?
Okay, it's going to take us to curriculum and instruction. Mr. Christensen, any items of discussion?
No, I think everything is pretty self-explanatory, just a couple adjustments as we have some people that are returning from leave. Obviously, number 2 is one that we're a little sad about, as we have announced that Mrs. Whitty will be leaving us to join the state. Ones that put fear into our hearts whenever they come into our buildings.
More help.
You
Yes.
imagine, we're out? No, it's fear.
No, this is moody.
Yes,
She wouldn't
I
do it.
know. You're gonna have to get that mean face.
No.
Thank you.
I don't think I have it.
You don't have it? You're gonna change that dynamic. Of course, we have the resignation of Mr. Yeager, and just things didn't work out. We had appointed Mrs. Weaver at our previous meeting, and just some things that didn't work out was benefits that she needed that we weren't able to provide. So, just letting you know, that's it.
Sounds good. Mrs. Farrell?
The Curriculum and Instruction Committee did not meet since our last board meeting, so there's no non-additional agenda items. So, yep, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 1 through 4 as written.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second, Papalardo?
Okay. And
Mrs. Bolton?
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mrs. Pope?
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes. All right. It's going to bring us to our public comment for this evening. This is public comment, not a dialogue between the board. If you'd like to have an opportunity to speak, please stand to the podium located at my left, state your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. To be recognized to speak right here at the podium so members of the public can hear you. Okay. Seeing no one. Sorry, things are a little, we have no new or old business, so I will adjourn and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Papalardo?
And a
Second, Grossman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next regular Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 15th at the Pitman High School Media Center at 7 p.m. Thank you.